Just say we'll start in 1 minute. Give them a 2-minute warning, maybe 2-minute warning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Just a notice that we're going to be starting in about a minute or two. So if you could be seated, please. Thank you.
Are we going to cue it up? Are we going to put it on the screen? Yep.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today, both in person and also we have some viewers online as well. As you know, today we'll be announcing the latest Myanmar Opium Survey, Cultivation, Production, and Implications, covering data and trends of the 2022 season. So my name is Kavinvadee Suppapongtevasakul, and I am an analyst with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, or UNODC, and I will be the MC and moderator for the event today. And together with me are Mr. Jeremy Douglas, UNODC Regional Representative for Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and also Mr. Inshik, who is a UNODC illicit drugs analyst. So before we begin, I would like to go over the program a bit today for what we have today. First, Mr. Douglas will have a few opening remarks, and from that we will go straight into the presentation on the major findings of the report presented by both Mr. Douglas and Mr. Shim. And following that, we will have a Q&A session. So before the Q&A session, I want to let you know as well that we will be accepting questions both from online and also from people here with us at the FCCT. So during the presentation for online viewers, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will ask them after the presentation is over. So with that, I think we should go straight into the event today. So Mr. Douglas, if you could begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Kundi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here at the Foreign Correspondents Club for the announcement of the Myanmar Opium Survey 2022. It's a really important document for us, first of its kind after the military takeover of a couple of years ago, with a full growing season of data to share with you. I'd like to begin by thanking those that have helped assisted us to make it happen, the United States and the governments of the United States and the government of Japan. Thank you very much. I'll actually begin by walking you through a little bit of why we do it, and then the methodology, because there are questions about how we access the country, how we're able to do this kind of work within the country itself. I think it's very important to put that in context. And then I'll turn it to my colleague Inshik, who will present the data to you. So just to explain to you why we are doing this exercise, we've been doing it for 20 years, a little more than 20 in fact, but using comparable data sets in a timeline series, 20 years now. It's really the purpose being to assess the scope of cultivation in terms of hectares, but also the production, how much is being produced in the country itself. And this year we've seen a massive change in both. One much more than the other, but we'll get into those details in a moment. Fundamentally, it's in place for us to help the country to develop programmatic responses, but also to help the region to develop strategies to respond, be those within the drug consumption space or drug supply space. So it's really for us to understand the magnitude of the challenge and that the country and the region face, and then to set the stage for solutions to that issue. I'd like to also announce today, as of this morning, the Opium Survey in Laos is underway, which will next year be presented alongside this one at the same time. So it'll be the first time in 7 years we have a full Golden Triangle survey together. And we actually have the helicopter left this morning from Vientiane to do the ground truthing in that country. Really pleased that that could actually take place, again with support from our colleagues of the United States. So without further ado, I'll just talk to you about the methodology. This survey is an incredibly comprehensive exercise, really fundamentally composed of two parts. One is the area estimation survey to monitor the extent of the cultivation, in other words, the hectares, the area, the geographic area or territory within which that production is taking place. The second is a yield survey, which is to determine the amount of opium that could be potentially produced in a given hectare. It varies in the different parts of the country. A very comprehensive effort is undertaken to make sure that that is understood. Based on those things, we can come to terms with roughly what we believe the production to be. Now this is a combination, it begins with a combination of technology, satellite survey in a sense. So we do this remote sensing using satellites, then we send teams in to the ground to do quality checks to verify on the ground. So if you look at the map here, this is where we've conducted the survey, Kachin, Shan, also in the west of the country, over in Chen. In that part of the country, I'll be full disclosure at the beginning, we don't access it. That's purely satellite. But nonetheless, this is the places that we look at, and this is based on the land cover, the altitude, and previous data from previous surveys where we know cultivation has taken place. So we look for change in the ground cover from the previous year, but we also look back at the places that were producing in prior years. And that allows us to identify survey sample locations for us to send teams in to do two things. One is to verify the cultivation itself. The other is to actually go and check how much yield is taking place in a given location in the country. So this is a kind of an example that we've put in the report, you can take a copy with you, of the satellite imagery that we use. So you can see in one to the other, essentially where we sense that there is highly likely opium cultivation. We have good data from the survey, from the satellites themselves, so we don't have to actually go to every single field. But basically this gives us a sense where there's been clearing done. And for those that are familiar with Myanmar and the rural agricultural techniques, it's really a slash and burn economy that's taking place. So there's basically, you can see where the farmers have slashed the forest, burned it, and then planted the opium. And this is another example of the same. So you see the two clearances, but you can see the connection between the field verification and the satellite imagery. So if you look to the image on the left, on the three that are together on the left side there, the one on the right is an example of the field after our team has gone in to the one just beside it. So basically, we've identified through the satellite where we suspect there is opium poppy cultivation. They then go, they verify. You'll notice something in some of the images, by the way, which is irrigation pipes, which is a unique feature this year, which my colleague Inshik will explain as well, and I can explain about how that has impacted the yield over the course of the past year. We then do the yield survey itself, the yield estimation, and our teams visited 370 poppy fields across the country, across these growing areas over the course of several months. Those were located in the following areas: in East, South, and North Shan and Kachin. Now, there's often a question about how do we access these areas and who's in charge of these areas. It's really a thorny issue in the country, as you know. In effect, you can't have one side versus the other in this. The villages that you're looking at or the locations that you're looking at are under various groups' controls in the country itself, be they pro, be they anti-junta. So this is the situation. We have had to inform all the groups that we're going, or they know we're going and they allow them to go in. And this is the type of work that the teams are doing. And I must say, these people are doing pretty incredible work. They're doing it right now as we speak, again. So we have those people going to those 370 locations last year. This year, probably a little bit more, given what we've seen in the satellites over recent months. But the fact is they're going and they're looking at the bulbs themselves, assessing how much gum is coming out of them, and then they're estimating from that how much is produced in the different parts. And it's different, actually, in different parts of Shan and Kachin, different yield and different hectares. Some very, very impressive yield figures the past year. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Inshik, who's our lead analyst in the region. He'll go into a deep dive on the data, and then we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to share some major findings of the 2020 Myanmar Opium Survey. This is the data for area under open poppy cultivation in Myanmar. As you can see, there has been a significant increase in the area under open poppy cultivations. In 2022, 40,100 hectares were under open poppy cultivation in the country, which is a 33% increase compared to 2021, which is quite mostly equal to the level of 2011. You can see that this shows the reversing the trends that observed since 2014. And in 2020, the open poppy cultivation kind of leveled off, and since then it's been increasing. And you can see that 2022 was the major uptick that we can see. In terms of distribution of open poppy cultivations, as you can see, the Shan accounts the large majority, about 86%. But when you look at within the Shan, you can see the South Shan is the largest share, 42%, followed by the East Shan, 23%, and North Shan, 21%. And Kachin is about a stable 11%, and Chin and Kaya both accounts for 3%. So all in all, basically nearly 90% of opium poppy cultivation took place in Shan State in 2022. There has been a significant change in the level of cultivations across all states except Kachin. You can see that the North Shan reported the largest increase in open poppy cultivations, 57%, followed by South Shan, 50%, East Shan, Chin, and Kaya. But Kachin was the only state that can be seen somewhat stable for the level of open cultivation between 2021 and 2022. This shows the open poppy cultivation density in 2021 and 2022. As you can see, there were some common characteristics in area those have high density of opium poppy cultivations. As you can see in the maps with the dark green colors, those represent the high density of opium poppy cultivations. One is the near some international borders. You can see in the, for instance, in Kachin area to the east of the Michikina, you can see the right next to the border of China that shows the high concentration of opium poppy cultivation. And at the same time, if you look at areas like Kachin on the northwest of Michikina and also Chin area, you can see the near the India borders also show some high density. When you look at the South Shan area near Tachlek on the northwest, a little bit far, and not little distance from the Tachlek area around the Mongsat also show high density, which is very close to the Thailand border area. The other point is you can see that some of the areas close to the special regions of Myanmar, Wa and Mongna, also show high density of opium poppy cultivations. So all in all, we were able to find that those high areas with the high density opium poppy cultivations share some characteristics on the area challenged by the governance issues and socio-economic and the security situation in that country. This is also really major development for this year, that you can see that average opium yield in Myanmar per hectare increased significantly. 2022, it amounted to 19.8 kilogram per hectare. This is a record since we started this survey for Myanmar, as you can see in the graph. Compared to 2021, when it was reported about 14 kilograms of opium yield per hectare, which is about 40% increase this year. Why is it increased? There are several factors. First one is, of course, the favorable conditions. For instance, the amount and timing of precipitations, and also the topography of that area. But we noticed this year that there has been an increasingly sophisticated farming practices being adopted by opium farmers, as well as the availability of fertilizers increased in 2022. So all these factors contributed to the increases in opium yield, which was reported as a record amount, 19.8 kilograms per hectare in 2022. So because of the increases in the area of opium poppy cultivations, combined with the amount of potential yield per hectare, the opium production in 2022 in Myanmar reached nearly 800 tons. Compared to the last year, which was 423 tons, basically there has been a nearly twice increase in the amount of opium produced in Myanmar. As you can see that since 2013, this is a record amount since 2013. And also we want to highlight that this is the increase from 2021 to 2022 is about 90%, which is a record single year production increase that we were able to observe in 2022. Despite increases in the production of opiums, the prices of opium also increased. In 2022, the data we collected from the states, from our colleagues in Myanmar, that shows that it amounted to $281 per kilo. Last year, 2021, data was about $160. So there has been a significant also increase in the price of dry opium in their countries. Several factors can play for the increase in the price of opium. The first one can be because there is some pressures on because of socioeconomic matters. The country has been going through this inflation. For instance, the recent data, the 2022 from World Bank, March 2022, the inflation is about 17% in their country. So the farmers have been in situations to recoup the price of their cultivation. The fertilizer prices have increased also as well as transportation price. And I think more importantly, I think the farmers started to seeing this opium as more like the stock that is kind of guaranteed for their income compared to other staples. I think it probably contributes to the increases in the price of opium in that country in 2022, despite the record amount of the opium produced in that country since 2013. We also look at how this opium and also the heroin that contributes in the country's economy. This is a breakdown of the opiate economy. Opiate basically means opium and heroin. Up to $2 billion have been generated from this opiate economy in 2022. The farmer's cut is quite small, but nonetheless it's increased quite a bit because of the increases in price of opium and the amount of opium as well. However, this does not necessarily translate into their increases in their income. As I mentioned, because of the other factors, increases in transportations, fertilizers, and also increases in the cost required for their living standard in their country. The biggest share goes to, this is the breakdown of the opiate economy in the country. The biggest share goes to export of opiates. Basically, this means that the share for traffickers, when the traffickers to export either it's opium or heroines, is 62% of the up to $2 billion US. So the cut for the traffickers also increased. Basically, the opiate economies gain more importance in Myanmar. On top of that, we also need to look at the surge of the synthetic drug production in that country. For instance, methamphetamine has been increasing. The supply has been increasing every year. So all in all, what we try to say here is that the drug economy in the countries is gaining much more importance than before in Myanmar. And also it has a significant regional implications because drug produced either in Myanmar, either is heroin or methamphetamines or ketamines that traffic across the countries and the Asia Pacific. Let me just briefly discuss on the eradications done by the Myanmar authorities. This is data from the Myanmar that shows that in 2022, it's about 1,400 hectares were eradicated, which is a 70% decrease compared to the previous years. It was actually the lowest amount of eradicated since the survey conducted. These maps show side by side the seizures of opium and heroin in Myanmar between November 2021 and October 2022. The left side one is the one with the brown color is opium. The purple color is heroin. When you look at it, it's basically this dispersed area, but the seizures in Shan's are very much limited. You can see that most of the seizures are made along the route between Mandalay to the northern Shan area that connects to Lasho, that road. Also, some seizures are made in the National Highway number 4 that comes to Taunji, Loilem, and those areas. And also some seizures are made, especially for heroin, interestingly, that seized near the India border and also China borders and Thailand borders. I think these are the major findings of the report, and I'd like to give the floor to Jeremy to conclude this.
Thanks. Thank you, Inshik. Very, very quick wrap up on that. Clearly, we've seen a steep increase in the cultivation and production over the course of the 22. As Inshik very rightly said, it comes against the backdrop of a very significant socioeconomic problem in the country, economic implosion. I think some of you are very familiar with World Bank data, not just the inflation data he referred to, but the economic contraction data of the year post-military takeover when the country experienced an 18% economic contraction. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, opium is an employer. This is all about poverty for the farming and for the production and cultivation. And what we're seeing is people returning to the employment opportunity that they have available to them in rural areas, particularly the north and in border areas. And that happens to be opium. It's been a long-standing employer of last resort, in a sense, in the country. I would point out that the declines that started in 2014 through last year, or through 2021, I guess, when it leveled off, really were reflective of that influx of foreign direct investment that the country experienced. A lot of people left opium farming. They had some assistance from some programs run by us and others, but fundamentally, people left opium farming for other employment. It's not a desirable form of employment, but those employment opportunities are now gone as a result of the situation in the country. But I think also we're going to see this resurgence of cultivation and production have some significant impact on the health of the region. We haven't seen the levels of production like this, I think it's back about a decade. So we're looking at an increased heroin supply, which will largely be feeding into the Asian market itself, There's still a very significant level of heroin use within China, within Vietnam, within other countries of the region that are reporting treatment emissions or through prevalence estimates, as limited as they are here, heroin use. And this brings with it, of course, challenges for public health systems and the need for harm reduction and other services here within the region. So we're going to see some impact on the broader region itself. This will fundamentally, for us as an organization, we're looking at how we can continue to engage within the country to help the communities that are most affected by this issue, by providing options for their resilience, providing options for them to have other economic options. And so we're doing that as we speak, but that work will remain will be much more important going into the future. So with that, I'm going to close. There's probably quite a few questions as the room is full, and we have online viewers as well. But I'd like to throw it open to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the detailed presentation. From the information presented, I think you can see that there has been a profound change in the opium economy and market in Myanmar over the past year, especially with the cultivation, the yield, and the prices. So as you mentioned, it'll be interesting to see what impact this will have on the drug economy, not only from Myanmar, but also in the region, which has been trending towards synthetic drugs over the past many years. So I'm sure there will be many questions on these developments. Before I let the floor ask questions, there's a microphone at the back of the room if you want to ask questions. But before we go into questions from here, we've already had some questions from our online viewers, so I'll start maybe with a few questions from our online viewers first. The first question, and I think there's also a related question I would like to ask Inshik, if you could take this question, please. The question is, how much heroin is being trafficked and how much heroin can the 700 tons of opium be converted to? And also related to this, since heroin precursors are also a problem, could you also maybe speak to these on why they aren't being stopped?
Yes, that's a good question. For conversion of heroin into opium into heroin, there is some debate about how much is required. There's a range between around 7 to 10, so 7 kilos of opium to 1 kilogram heroin, or 10 kilogram opium to 1 kilogram of heroin. So nonetheless, 790 tons is a midpoint. The upper point is about over 1,000 tons of opium, so which could and the amount of direct opium consumption is not much. So most of this opium can be, in fact, converted into heroin and then trafficked across the Asia Pacific. For that matters, I think that is a bit debatable, but 7 to 10 ratio is the one that I can mention, and direct consumption is not much. And then, in terms of the trafficking of, it was precursor, right? The chemical matters. This is a huge challenge for heroin as well, not only methamphetamine. We've been highlighting the issue of these precursor chemicals, but in order to manufacture heroin, you need acetic anhydride, which is a key component of the heroin manufacture from opium. However, we don't really see the seizures of acetic anhydride anymore. Myanmar used to see some amount of acetic anhydride, but it's really dried up since around 2020. So it's a huge challenge that why we don't see the acetic anhydride seizures from Myanmar or other countries. That's why we are really expecting that because of increasing opium productions and availability of opium to be converted for heroins and no seizures of the key chemicals, we might be able to see the increased supply of heroin in the region.
Okay, thank you very much, Inshik. And next we have a question on the data, which I think I'll pass to you, Jeremy. About the question is, do the data reflect reality and access to areas, or are they an underestimate? And how independent is the data in reality?
Okay. Well, I think I tried to stress the independence of the data, given that the data is collected from a broad range of locations, which are under various groups' control, be they government, quasi-de facto government control, or the allied militias, BGFs and PMFs, but also the EAOs. So we've had access to all of those different types of areas, and we feel the estimate is quite accurate as a result. There is a range applied to the data because one can never be 100% on exactly how much, but with it's pretty safe estimate of what we're looking at right now.
Thank you very much. And I think this will be the last question we take online for now. This one I'd like to give to Inshik. You mentioned about 2 billion is the value in the country, but figures for the region would be different. So what would you say is the value in the region?
Okay, we put it in the report as well, but the regional, this OPA value could go up to 10 billion. But this is important to highlight that this data was done 4 years ago already. Since then, we have shown you that uptick, significant uptick in the availability of opium for the conversion of heroin, and also the price of heroin has been increasing. The most latest data that we received from neighboring countries of Myanmar show increases in the price of heroin, for instance. In Thailand, the latest information that we received, the wholesale price is over $10,000 per kilogram. It used to be always under 10,000, but it's now over 10,000. And when the traffickers bring this heroin into Thailand and further down to Malaysia, which is a higher price than that of Thailand, goes to all the way to Australia, which shows that per gram of heroin can be about $300. So the traffickers can make much more money than the money that generated inside of Myanmar. So the answer is, the latest data that we have is 10 billions, but judging by all the increases in the productions and availability of opiums and the increases in price, it will be higher than 10 billion, probably a few more billions on top of that.
I would just add a point about the comparison to methamphetamine. It's actually going in the opposite direction, going down in price because of the sheer volume that is produced in the country. And I think another point to make is the fact that the synthetic drugs are immediately scalable. And we saw that in the aftermath of 2021, the surge was within months. We were seeing massive volumes being seized in Thailand and the rest of the region as a whole plethora of small armed groups started producing and tableting methamphetamine. Whereas with opium, we have a time lag because you have to slash the forest, clear it, plant, and harvest. And that took a year. So the surge is a delayed, that's why the delay. But if the price point stays where it is now, it's going to be highly attractive to continue to cultivate it and traffic it, so which is quite alarming.
Okay, so thank you very much. We do have more questions online, but first I would like to have people who are here with us ask some questions. So please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Gwen Robinson from Nikkei Asia. I just wanted to ask a simple question about the economics of all this. You've said that with big increases in synthetic drug production, the prices go down, but with heroin, opium, we've just heard about a massive increase in production and also an increase in price. And you'll say that's a pretty steep price increase, $160 to $280. So how does that all relate? What's the economics of that, both price spike as well as production spike for opium?
As I mentioned earlier, the factors, opiate, there were several reasons for increases in the opium price because of the farmers have invested quite a bit to cultivate opium. But I would like to highlight the key difference between the opium and synthetics. Opium, we need a massive workforce, like farmers. So there is some certain price, the cost that requires cannot be really negotiated. They have to take some sort of income from this whole process of the opium business and opium economy. Synthetic is a bit different. The income can be consolidated into very small number of people. So they have the powers to control the price. Because you don't need a massive workforce to produce methamphetamine or ketamine. You just need the people who have a knowledge of chemicals and produce methamphetamines. So basically, they can control the price. If they have a massive amount, they have a very competitive advantage to push the market into where they want to, unlike the opiate and heroines. I think that's the big difference between the two.
I would add, I think there's been a lot of talk of methamphetamine in recent years including by ourselves, because we're tracking the situation and reporting on it. But the fact is that there is still, despite the significant shift towards synthetic drugs in this region, particularly methamphetamine, now more recently we'll soon be talking a lot about ketamine, but the fact is that there is still a significant demand for heroin within the Asia-Pacific region, particularly in countries I highlighted earlier like China, Vietnam, that have had a history of opiate use and injection drug use, Thailand as well, Malaysia has some demand, all the way to Australia, and all of those countries are reporting to us that all of their heroin comes from this location, from Shan State or from Myanmar. So there's no Afghan heroin coming into this region. So it's still a distinct market, significant demand, and a very large population that can absorb the product. So it's still there as an issue, despite all the talk of methamphetamine. I think the other thing that Inshik touched on, and I think it's worth elaborating a little bit, is the difference between the synthetics and the heroin. The synthetics are, the traffickers are very clearly driving the market. There's two types of ways they're driving it. Those that are trafficking crystal methamphetamine and some of the bigger tableters in Myanmar are very purposefully flooding the region, and they've been doing this for several years, but over the course of the past year and a half in a very significant way. And they make more profit now than they did previously through volume sales. So the price can collapse and they can continue to drive the market and push the product and make it through volume sales and drive the demand in a sense. So it's really a supply-driven market in the synthetics case at this point in time. We don't see that yet with heroin, but let's see where the situation goes.
I'm David Feingold from Ophidian. First, I'm going to make a very brief comment. I am usually highly critical, or I have been in the past, of the reports and the methodology. But I would say this year, I haven't had a chance to go through it completely. I'm really impressed by what you've been able to produce under incredibly difficult circumstances. So there's an unusual compliment for me. I have two questions.
We don't get many from folks
Yeah,
like you. So
I know.
I'll take
and
it.
deservedly so in the past, but so appreciate what you've got now. I have two questions, one a very easy one, and then a more difficult question. One of the things that has been true, I first went into Shan States in 1964 when a lot of you were a lot younger, and went through opium fields. And one of the things that's been clear for the past 50 years is that political instability favors the production of drug crops over food crops. And as you pointed out, I think very clearly, is that people treat opium as a currency, as something they can keep and invest in, particularly in times of high inflation. So two questions. One, very easy one. I'd like you to talk a bit more about irrigation, which was not something that was widely seen in the past. That's the easy one. The more difficult one is, to what extent do you feel that cooperation with the military junta, in fact, promotes exactly the conditions that promote increased drug production, which you're trying to do away with? And I'll throw in a sub-point on that. I know you won't feel comfortable about it, but could you say something about corruption? Because there's certainly a lot of it, and there's many generals making quite a bit of money out of the drug trade.
Okay, I'll start and maybe Inshik can add. In terms of the irrigation systems that we witnessed, and we've got a lot more photos than the two that we put up with the irrigation systems, one of which was quite sophisticated, had sprinkler systems and so forth. So we have an office in Tonji, and we have one in Kachin as well. So we have our 3 offices there, and our field staff have been asked, they work closely with farmers, and they ask them a lot of questions in the course of their work, either in the coffee program that we have or through the field surveys. We task them with certain questions to ask. When we started seeing the photos, we asked where they were getting them from, the irrigation systems and the fertilizers. It's very clear that there was an encouragement by people from the special regions. There were representatives that came down into Shan State And that's one of the reasons why you see the significant jump in production very close to the special regions themselves. And that's where you also see the biggest jump in yield. That's where a lot of those irrigation systems are now in place. They've been provided with them. It's, in a sense, a contract farming type arrangement where they are receiving fertilizer and receiving irrigation system assistance from people that are encouraging them to grow the opium. So there has been a partnership of sorts between the representatives of people in these, where the heroin labs are based, and the places that are growing the opium. So that sophistication has been introduced to a point, because in the past we've not seen this very prevalent as we have in the course of the past year. And it isn't simply, I would say, in Shan only. We also saw some irrigation systems in other parts of the country as well. But that's a unique feature of this past survey and the reports, anecdotal and otherwise, that we've received out of our Tonji office and Kachin staff as well, or staff that were going into Kachin. In terms of the other question on engagement with the de facto authorities, since the military takeover, I mean, we have 3 offices in that country, as do a lot of other international organizations, international partners that have embassies and so forth. We have representation in that country. We have to, when we do a survey like this, inform them that we're doing it, as we also had to inform a variety of other groups, some of which I met, some of which my colleagues in Myanmar have met, for the purposes of informing them that what we will do as we execute the survey and send people into these areas. But the point being that we're engaging all sides. We're not offering technical assistance to the government, the de facto authorities. That ceased in February 2021. And for those that have said we are, they are very mistaken. They can say so if they wish, but they're mistaken. But the fact is that we have to inform them, and we have to maintain access into those areas, because it's very crucial work. This data is vital for all of what we're doing, and a lot of those people that are considering plans in that country or with the neighbors need to know what's going on. So that's the purpose of this exercise. And I think Inshik, you might. No? No? Okay. And the last part of your question, sorry, I forgot. You had a follow-up, I think. Corruption, sorry. Drug trade can't survive without it. And I think if you look at the volumes of drugs that are moving through this region, corruption greases the wheels of the trade. And the fact is that whether it's the chemicals that are moving into the country, the drugs that are moving out, they're all crossing borders, and I think we all appreciate the extent to which corruption is facilitating a lot of these businesses. The extent to which individual generals or individual members of different authorities are involved is up for debate. But the fact is that in that country, I don't think it's fair, it's not wise to point at any one group side. Everyone's making money in these areas. And for drugs to get to the Thai border from North Shan requires transiting a whole range of different territories under different groups' controls, all of whom attacks the trade along the way. And this is the way the business works. There's a prearranged payment system, which the Thai government has explained and we've discussed in the past, of how things work as they transit towards the border. But the point being that corruption really greases the wheels of the trade. And this is the fact worldwide. It's the fact there too.
You have a question?
Yeah, it's Jerry Harmer from the Associated Press. Even though Afghanistan is still the major supplier here, these figures still appear to be quite eye-opening. So how great a concern is this to you, even though it's still not the major world player?
Well, I think we're deeply concerned, because this data is last year's data. Our survey's underway now, and the trajectory appears to be the same. It's continuing. So we'll highly likely be reporting something similar next year, the magnitude of which will be clear in that time. But the Golden Triangle, in a sense, is back in the opiate business. We, after many, many years, had seen it drop off, and now we see this sudden resurgence. And so we are deeply concerned, because if this continues on this trajectory for a few more years and the economy remains in the state that it's in now, it's highly likely to therefore remain on that trajectory. We're going to be looking at a significant broader impact on the societies around that country. It's highly also likely that we'll start seeing the heroin from this area, which is much more desirable, I would add, than the Afghan heroin supply. That is broadly known in the business that it's the best. So it will start going further afield. Currently, the Australian market is fed by the Golden Triangle, as is all of the regional market, China, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, countries I've touched on, that are consuming it. They're getting this product. But it will start going further because of the desirability of it. So we're going to start seeing this mushroom, in a sense.
Thank you. Your question, please.
Thank you. Lisa Elgas, anti-corruption integrity lawyer with the Green Climate Fund. My question is about the illicit proceeds and the conditions that you understand either in Myanmar or in neighboring countries in the banking and financial system that is facilitating the laundering of those resources, and also then the subsequent risk of terrorist financing.
Well, we've actually studied exactly that over the course of the past few years when we've looked at the relationship between money laundering businesses in this region and the drug trade. And I would suggest that you look beyond simply banks in that instance. So our initial assessment, going back 2015, 16, we were looking at the casino infrastructure at that time. And we've done some studies with the governments of this region following some discussions we had with the Mekong Group of States in 2019, 2020, to assess the use of the casino infrastructure at that time for drug money laundering. Of course, that radically changed, as we've seen in the media the past couple of years as we did yet further analysis. But the point being that the casino infrastructure of this region plays a key pivotal role in moving drug monies. A lot of the casinos that are present in the Golden Triangle, be they in Myanmar, in Laos, or basically around the Tidewaters, have been invested in with drug money. There are key drug producers in Myanmar that are owners of casinos. So those casinos play a key pivotal role in moving drug monies. And we've seen, of course, with the plethora of casinos moving online and so forth, we've seen the ability of those casinos to mix monies from different sources and globalized money through them with drug monies. So that's a very significant concern of ours. But of course, there's a lot of other cash-based economy pieces in this region, hotels and so forth, that are utilized for the same purpose. I would add, though, that the banks of this region that are doing the banking for the casinos are particularly vulnerable. And this is something which I trust the FATF and others will be looking at carefully, much more carefully than they have in the past, is the outside the banking system sector and how that connects into the banking system. Because the illicit financial flows from this are very large. They're even larger, much, much larger when it comes to synthetic drugs. As we've said, they're scalable, as is the money, therefore. So we would suggest that this is something that that group takes up very actively in the coming years. Thank you.
I'm Kim also from working for Radio Free Asia Burmese Service. So the army officials who recently fled to the Thai-Burma border to join the democratic forces, they said senior General May outline the coup leader is involved in the drug money exactly, or his family. So did you people try to find the May outline involvement in drugs, please?
I think I can take that. It's hard to draw a direct connection to any one individual, as I said earlier. They don't make that easy for you. That's the purpose of laundering money and disguising it. But at the end of the day, the monies being generated are very significant. The entities that are involved in the drug production and trafficking are very significant, including those that are under the umbrella of the de facto authorities. So there is opportunity for enrichment of various characters. We cannot say with any evidence that there is involvement of any specific official at this point in time.
Did you try?
Could I try? I'd have to have something to point to. I mean, there's no point in debating what we don't have evidence of. So there'd have to be evidence of it. But we've seen some media reports, as you're well aware, I'm sure, of Tun Min Lat and connections and his business interests and so forth. But that's the type of information many of us see, but we don't have evidence beyond some other instances like that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Jeremy Inshik. I'm Gloria from the International Drug Policy Consortium. So I wanted to ask about the drug policy response from the government that the UNODC would recommend. And I understand that this increasing trend in both synthetic drugs and less so for opium has been kind of increasing significantly over recent years. And there's been policy changes in Thailand in particular to try to address. For example, in making reforms to kind of target more high-level people in the supply chain as opposed to those on the lower end. How would the UNODC recommend responses from, I guess Myanmar is not really possible, but from neighboring countries and for donors that are supporting responses in the region?
Well, maybe you can add, but we have advised or worked closely with Porpasor, with ONCB, and with other colleagues of the Thai government on their new drug law reform process over the recent years, and it's been a great partnership. I would say that rebalancing that you described, where it's let's target the traffickers and not the users or the lower end of the drug chain, if you will, that is only now beginning to be implemented. So we'll see hopefully that take root and be implemented over the course of time. So it'll change the dynamic here, and we'll see less people being imprisoned and certainly more people, drug users, accessing treatment rather than imprisonment. But these are early days, to be honest. It's been 1 year since the drug law change, and several regulations followed and are still in discussion. So let's see how that plays out. At a regional level, we're advising states to really strongly reflect on the approach to drug supply reduction, because fundamentally it has been the same for decades, where states tend to focus on volumes and seizures, but not on the people behind the business or the other elements that are associated with it, like the corruption and the money laundering and the organized crime. And that's fundamentally where we advise law enforcement focus to shift, because it doesn't change the situation. Especially synthetic drugs have massively changed the dynamic in the drug business, because as I said, they're scalable, they're also replaceable. Some of the big syndicates, as many experts here would know, can simply replace a load. They advertise that, in a sense, to their clients, that if we lose it, we replace it. We lose it, we replace it. And they can apparently lose 9 of 10 and still profit. So it has changed the business. So focusing on the volumes is ineffective. You have to focus on those that run the business and focus on the things that they are able to utilize for it: chemical trade, money, and the tools that they need and use. That discussion is still early days, because you can't shift a policy paradigm overnight, which we're describing, which is getting states to refocus their effort there. But fundamentally as well, it has to shift away from a supply-specific focus. The region does not invest in demand reduction to the extent that it invests in supply reduction. And that means they have to invest in their public health services and the range of those services that are necessary, and that in a way that is reflective of the challenge they face, not simply 1% of the budget on that and 99 on the other, which is the historic type of approach. If that percentage is accurate, I don't know, but that's the type of logic. So we would really advise that they shift towards prevention and demand reduction and health services, and focusing on organized crime elements. And that might bring about a sense of a positive direction in the trajectory of this challenge that the region is faced with, which is enormous and growing. It seems to never end. And in terms of the other element is, I think, regional cooperation is fundamental and vital. Our colleagues at ONCB or the Royal Thai Police have to work with their neighbors, and that's immensely challenging, and that's where we come in and help broker conversations or solutions. But the traffickers and those that are dominant in this business play off governments that can't cooperate quickly and efficiently, and this region still struggles with cooperation that is quick and efficient, whereas the other side is very quick and efficient. So there has to be significant improvement in regional cooperation, which means candid, honest, open discussions about the challenges they face, and the fact that putting aside the various national agendas and saying we have to get on with this. So we would advise a range of solutions. Hopefully those come together in some meaningful way and make a positive change.
I mean, if I can add, Jeremy touched upon everything that, but if you look at the situation in Myanmar, for instance, where the drug is produced, they have a favorable conditions for that. So many players, governance challenges, armed groups, territories that can be accessed, basically virtually can be accessed by law enforcement of that country. So in overnight, suddenly we expect that the country will have a better governance systems or something, the peace achieved and drug production will stop. There will be no production of drug in the country. That will not happen anytime soon, unfortunately. So more practical, I would say, solution would be really curtail the flows of chemicals before it reaches to the drug production site. In order to do that, you need people working at the border areas to understand what types of chemicals can be used for the manufacture of either heroin or meth or ketamines. But the current level is not really desirable. A lot of officers working at the borders, they don't have understandings of what chemicals can be used for the manufacture of these drugs. So I think UNODC has been trying to work hard with all these officials working along the borders to have a better understandings of this potential usage, illicit usage of chemicals.
Yeah. I would just add one point on the regional cooperation. There are a couple of discussions that will take place soon in the region. One is ministers of the Mekong will gather to talk about exactly this, and that will be a very important moment because of the situation we've been describing and discussing here. I think also, though, I'm not sure why they haven't done it, but because we could see this coming for the last 2 years. This is not exactly unpredictable, given the economic consequences of what transpired in 2021. What we see is the expansion and therefore more importance of the drug economy in that country. But the regional impact is enormous, and yet the ASEAN group is not discussing it. And we would highly advise that the Southeast Asian states collectively look at this at a political level, not just simply police to police. This is not a police are not going to solve this. This requires political discussion at the highest of levels to acknowledge that they've got a situation within their midst which is affecting them all. And so we would strongly advise that that type of conversation takes place. There are various plans out there, this 5-point plan, but it doesn't talk about those other types of impact on the broader region itself. And that conversation, when we have it one-on-one with different ministers or different chiefs of police in the region, they all acknowledge it's a significant problem. But collectively, they're not looking at each other and having the conversation to say, we need to do something about this together, bringing regional pressure to bear on the situation. So we would advise that as well.
Thank you very much. And right now we're right at about noon, so actually we've been very good with time for the announcement today. So thank you very much for joining us today. For people who are viewing online, the copy of the report is available on the UNODC website. If you go to unodc.org/ROSEAP, you can find a PDF copy of the report there. So thank you very much, and of course you're welcome to contact us if you have any further questions about the report after the event today. So thank you.